Hi, I'm Aveline. 12 years ago, my sister said I kicked our dog. She cried. My parents believed her. I lost my home, my future, even my cat, taken by animal control like I was some kind of threat. They cut me out like I was diseased. No questions, no defense. Now? Now they want to talk. Why? Because the truth finally slipped out? Because the mask Vera wore started to crack? Because silence doesn't last forever? Especially when it was never mine to begin with? It had been 12 years since I saw that name on my phone. I was sitting in my apartment in Hillsborough, curled up on the corner of my worn-out sofa, wrapped in a throw blanket I bought on clearance a decade ago. My old space heater hummed in the background, battling the soft chill of Oregon's early spring. I wasn't doing anything remarkable, just sipping on herbal tea and absent-mindedly scrolling through news. Then it happened. A vibration on the coffee table, and there it was. Mom! I didn't open it. I didn't even breathe for a moment. My hands froze halfway toward the screen. That name, I thought I'd deleted it. But I hadn't. I'd simply buried it beneath the weight of everything I never wanted to remember. That familiar sting started behind my eyes, a dull pressure like a migraine that had been waiting in the wings for years. I didn't tap to read the message. I just stared at it, as if maybe, if I waited long enough, the screen would go dark and take the past with it. It didn't. Eventually, curiosity or masochism got the better of me. I unlocked the phone. "We miss you. Your sister has something she wants to tell you. Please call us." I laughed. Not the kind of laugh you let out at a good joke. More like the involuntary kind that slips through when something hurts too much to cry. My sister wanted to tell me something? After what she did? After what they all did? I set the phone down like it was something venomous. My tea had gone cold. The silence in the room wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. The only sound was the steady hum of the heater and the sound of my own pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay on the couch with a pillow hugged to my chest, staring at the ceiling, retracing every moment of the last time I heard their voices. My mom screaming through the phone, my dad silent in the background, Vera's accusations so vivid, so rehearsed. That final blow. "We don't want you contacting us again." The memory hit like a punch I never learned how to dodge. I had begged them to listen. Not to believe me, necessarily, just to listen. But they didn't want truth. They wanted peace. And I was easier to bury than confront. By morning, I still hadn't responded. The sun had barely begun to rise when I drove to the gas station down the block. My tank wasn't empty, but I needed an excuse to step outside, breathe different air. I didn't expect to run into anyone. I rarely did. I'd built a life designed to be invisible. But there she was. Cam. We hadn't spoken since high school, not really. She was standing at the register, fumbling with a bag of gum and a Red Bull. Our eyes locked for half a second before hers widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Aveline?" I hesitated. "It's me," I said. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else. Cam stepped closer, lowering her voice. I always knew you didn't do it. I swear, I wanted to say something back then. I was just a kid. My parents told me to stay out of it. I'm sorry." I didn't have words. For the first time in over a decade, someone said it. "You didn't do it." I think I mumbled something like, "Thanks," before retreating outside. The air felt different, heavier. I didn't drive home. I walked, left my car at the pump like an idiot, and just walked. Every step took me back. Hallway at home, Vera standing in the doorway of my room. Toby's whimper, my mother's scream. The look in Vera's eyes, flat, determined. I passed the bakery, the church on the corner, the dog park I still couldn't bring myself to visit. My shoes slapped against the sidewalk like reminders of where I was and how far I hadn't gone. Back at the apartment, I sat at my desk and stared at the message again. Then came another one. "Vera said something at dinner. We're not sure what to think anymore. We want to hear your side." My side. 12 years too late. I didn't respond. I just stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled down the old shoebox I hadn't touched in a decade. Inside, letters I never mailed, receipts I kept for reasons I couldn't explain, and a photo of me holding Toby the year before everything fell apart. I sat on the floor, box open in front of me, heart pounding like a warning bell. I unfolded the first letter in that box, and the handwriting made my stomach twist. The shoebox smelled like dust and old paper, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe the trace of everything I once cared to remember, now folded and yellowed. Nestled between receipts and faded photos was an envelope, unsealed but still crisp. My name was written in Cam's handwriting. Neat, careful. The postmark? June 2012. I sat with it in my lap for longer than I care to admit. The apartment was quiet, as always. No music, no distractions. Just the low hum of the fridge and the soft tick of the wall clock marking off a new kind of silence. I didn't tear the envelope open. I peeled it slowly, like I was unwrapping a memory that didn't want to be seen. Cam had written in blue ink, the kind you only use when you're trying to make something feel personal. Her words were steady at first, then wavered halfway through. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a coward," she started. "But after everything that happened, my parents told me not to get involved. Your mom called my house and told them you weren't safe to be around, that you had snapped. I didn't believe it, not fully, but I didn't say anything either." I stopped reading. My mouth tasted like metal. "I don't think you hurt that dog. I never did. You were always gentle, even when the rest of us were loud or careless. But silence felt safer. I'm sorry." It wasn't just the apology. It was the admission that someone had known. That people around me had questions but chose comfort over confrontation. "Sometimes silence isn't neutral," I whispered. "It's permission." I laid the letter on my coffee table like it was something holy, something to be examined slowly. Then, almost without thinking, I opened my laptop. A quick search of my name still led to forums I didn't want to remember. Portland girl dog abuse scandal was still cached in some corner of the internet, a ghost that never learned to rest. But then I found something different. On a Reddit thread called Confessions You'll Never Say Aloud, posted 2 years ago under a throwaway account, someone had written, "I once accused someone of something I made up. I panicked. I didn't want to get in trouble. My family believed me, and now it's too late. I think about it every day. I hate myself for it." It could have been anyone. Internet anonymity is a shield for cowards and victims alike. But the phrasing, the way the writer used short, clipped sentences, how they avoided directly naming what happened, it felt like something I'd read before. I opened old texts from Vera, the ones I hadn't deleted for reasons I could never explain. She always typed in fragments, always skipped proper punctuation unless she was trying to sound sincere. I read the post again. My eyes caught a line. "They still think I was the victim." That's when the theory began to take shape. Not like an explosion, more like a slow burn through the walls I'd built to keep myself safe. What if Vera hadn't just lied? What if she tripped over Toby? What if it was an accident, and instead of owning it, she looked around for someone to blame and found me? I remembered her pacing in the hallway that night. She always chewed her thumbnail when she lied. It was a habit that started in childhood and never fully left. If she didn't lie, she would have had to admit she was the one who hurt the dog. And Vera didn't do wrong. Vera did performance. I printed the Reddit post, circled the phrase. I wasn't even sure what I'd do with it, but something in me needed it on paper. Like holding the truth gave it weight. Back at the coffee table, I took the letter from Cam and laid it beside the printout. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Truth. I stared at those 2 items, one from a friend too scared to speak, another from a stranger who maybe wasn't a stranger at all. Maybe that's all I ever wanted. Someone, anyone, to believe me. My phone buzzed. It was Vera. "Can we talk?" My hands didn't shake, but my heart did. I opened the message. I didn't answer Vera's message. I didn't even read it again. I just sat at my desk, the shoebox still open beside me, and let the weight of the past pull me under like a rip current. That's how it always started. One small wave, then a flood. And then I was back there. Sunday evening. I remember it was just before dinner. My dad was watching a game in the living room. Mom was setting the table. Vera was in her room, door cracked, music playing low. I was in mine, sitting on the floor with Toby. He was old then, stiff in the legs, but sweet as ever. I'd wrapped one of his favorite blankets around him. It had his scent, and mine, woven into the threads like a quiet history we never told out loud. And then the barking started. Not a warning bark, just startled, high-pitched. Then came Vera's voice, loud, shaken. "She kicked Toby!" I stood up too fast, heart dropping like a stone. My door was already opening. I didn't have time to speak. Mom came rushing in, eyes wild. Dad followed behind, slower but silent. "She kicked him!" Vera cried again, pointing at me. "I saw her. She lost it." I didn't say a word, not yet. I looked down at Toby, who had limped into the hallway, tail tucked. Vera bent down, lifting his hind leg just enough to show a bruise I'd never seen before. "Look at that," she said. "What else do you need?" I finally found my voice. "I didn't touch him." Judith didn't even blink. "You expect us to believe that after everything?" "After what exactly?" I asked. But I already knew the answer. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't even the safe one. I was the one they always whispered about when they thought I couldn't hear. No one asked for my side. No one even looked me in the eye. I didn't even get a trial, I remember thinking. Just a sentence. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Vera stood still, arms crossed. Mom's hand shook as she pulled her phone from her pocket. Dad didn't speak, not one word. "You need to leave," Judith said, voice level. "Tonight." "You're kidding." Her eyes narrowed. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" I turned to Vera. "Tell them the truth." She blinked slowly. "You think this is easy for me?" "You're lying," I said. She shrugged. "Or maybe you just can't remember it straight anymore." I tried once, just once, to plead. I didn't hurt him. I would never. But pleading only works when someone wants to listen. That night, nobody did. They gave me 15 minutes to pack. I remember because I asked for more time and was told, "You're lucky we're not calling someone else." I took a duffel, some clothes, my phone. That was it. Milo. I hadn't even thought about Milo yet. He was hiding under my bed. When I got down to coax him out, Mom was already calling someone. She stepped out the front door and spoke in hushed tones. Minutes later, a knock. A man in uniform. "Officer Malone," he said. "We've received a concern about potential animal mistreatment. Just a precaution, ma'am." Milo didn't understand. He meowed when they carried him away in that hard plastic crate, looking back at me like I could fix it. I didn't cry until the door shut. That sound, the final latch. It took something out of me I never got back. I collapsed in the driveway, the duffel slipping from my shoulder, my hands pressed against the concrete. They didn't come outside. No one followed me. That was the night everything collapsed. Back in the present, I walked to the fridge and stared at the photo of Milo, taped in the corner, edges curling. His eyes were still clear in the picture. That old photo had survived 3 apartments and 2 cities. I'd thought about throwing it away more than once, but something always stopped me. I sat back down at my desk. I didn't open Vera's message. Instead, I opened a blank document and started to type. What they took from me. Each line felt like lifting a stone from my chest and setting it down where it belonged. Home, trust, a future, Milo, 12 years. I hit save. The phone rang. Mom. The phone rang 3 times before I pressed accept. I didn't plan to answer. I was just tired of letting everything stay frozen. I didn't say hello. I didn't need to. Judith's voice filled the line, softer than I remembered. We both knew the version of her that used to bark orders didn't fit anymore. There was hesitation in her tone, like she had rehearsed this call 100 times and still didn't know how to start. "I've been meaning to say something," she said, her voice edged with breath. "Something I never told you." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The rain outside tapped the windows like a nervous child asking to be let in. "There's a lot you never told me," I said. Not bitter, just flat. Judith hesitated. "That night, the night you left, there was a neighbor, Harriet. You remember her?" I nodded, forgetting she couldn't see. "Of course." She said she saw something. I didn't want to hear it at the time. She mentioned that maybe it wasn't you who hurt the dog. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. "And what did you say to her?" "I told her not to meddle. I told her we had it under control." I closed my eyes. I remembered Harriet that night, standing by her front door in her blue robe. She had peeked out when things got loud. I'd seen her watching, hand on her hip, face tight. There was something in her expression. A question. Or maybe guilt. She'd looked like she wanted to say something. But then Judith had yanked me by the elbow, told me not to make a scene on the sidewalk. And Harriet? She went inside and shut the door. "They always say it's not my business, until they're forced to admit it always was," I said. She saw the lie and decided her comfort mattered more. Judith didn't argue. "I know." There was a long pause. "That night," she finally said, "I told you to pack your things. Do you remember what I said?" I leaned back in my chair. "I remember every word." She inhaled. "I told you to come back when you were ready to admit it." I didn't speak. Judith continued, slower now. "I didn't want to believe Vera would lie. I needed the story to be simple. Your silence made it easy to believe." I swallowed that. Let it settle like old dust on the tongue. "What about now?" I asked. "Now I can't live with what we did to you." There it was. 12 years late, cracked at the edges. But there. I stood up and walked to the front closet, still holding the phone to my ear. I opened the box marked Milo's papers. Inside were old vet bills, adoption forms, and a fraying photo of him curled at the edge of my bed. But something new caught my eye. Something I'd completely forgotten about. A flash drive, duct taped to the underside of the box lid. It was the one from the security camera. The pet cam I'd set up that year to catch Milo jumping on the kitchen counters while I was gone. I hadn't thought about it in years. I stared at it. Judith was still speaking. I only caught half of what she said. "Been acting strange. Vera, distant, agitated. She says things that don't make sense. I think she might say something soon. You should be prepared." I pulled the flash drive off the lid slowly, like it might burn my fingers. "It took a neighbor's silence," I said, "my mother's delay, and my sister's lies to build this wall. And now you want me to help tear it down?" Judith didn't reply. I walked back to the desk and set the drive next to the keyboard. "I'll be in touch," I said. And I ended the call. I didn't know what was on that drive, but part of me hoped it would burn everything down. The flash drive clicked into place with a soft sound, barely noticeable over the buzz of the lamp on my desk. The folder popped up immediately. No password, no encryption. Just a simple title, Scholarship Records. For a moment, I hesitated. My name on a file shouldn't have made me nervous, but it did. I clicked it open. There were scanned PDFs, emails, even photos of a younger me with a clipboard at a local animal rescue, a snapshot from a time I had dared to plan a future. One file caught my eye. The scholarship letter. Full ride? Oregon State, Animal Welfare Program. I had framed that letter once, hung it next to my bedroom mirror, proud like any kid who made it out of a tight space. But there was another document. It looked just like the first. Same letterhead, same font. But this one was dated 2 weeks later. Subject line, Revocation of Award. I read it twice before I understood. Due to recent concerns raised by the community regarding Ms. Aveline Hart's suitability for animal care, we are withdrawing the scholarship offer. No explanation, no investigation, just erased. My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. I remembered that call now. I was at the kitchen table. Mom had just put down the phone, said something vague about a misunderstanding. Then my phone rang. "We regret to inform you." That's all they said. I hadn't cried then. I'd swallowed it whole like another part of me that didn't deserve to speak. I sat there, staring at that letter, until the sun slipped lower in the sky. It was too quiet in the apartment. I opened my laptop, searched the nearest shelter in Beaverton, and clicked the adoption inquiry link. I typed in a fake name, Maggie Peterson, and selected a small gray tabby cat. A few clicks later, the form asked for ID verification. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I typed my real name. The site froze for a second. Then, refreshed. "Unfortunately, your application cannot proceed at this time. Please contact administration if you believe this is an error." I sat back in the chair. My chest felt hollow. I called the shelter. A young man answered, cheerful at first. "Hi, yes. I just submitted an adoption form, and it was rejected. Can I ask why?" He paused. I heard typing. Then his tone shifted. "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't disclose internal notes. But the record here, it's flagged. Community reported concern several years ago." I kept my voice steady. "Flagged by who?" Another pause. It just says, "Report submitted by Judith Hart." My breath left me before I realized it. I leaned forward, elbows on the desk, staring at nothing. She hadn't just cut me off. She'd made sure no one else would take me in. No pet, no second chance, just this echoing silence that followed me wherever I tried to restart. I cleared my throat and asked for the supervisor. 10 minutes later, I was on the line with a middle-aged woman who sounded like she'd seen too many of these situations. "Ms. Hart, I know this is hard to hear, but we still have the original record from your mother. It cites behavioral instability, past trauma involving a family pet, and an unverified concern submitted during your scholarship period. We keep those for liability." "Liability?" I whispered. "For a lie?" She didn't respond. I thanked her and ended the call. That night, I started a new folder on my computer. I called it Erasure. I scanned the documents from the drive. Every letter, every revocation, every scar dressed as formality. Then I added the shelter rejection screen, the call log, and a recording of the conversation with the supervisor. I wasn't going to plead for understanding anymore. I was going to document it. They erased me from their story. I was writing my own now. I was about to shut the computer when I noticed another file buried in the downloads, an email thread I didn't recognize. I clicked it open. Subject line, RE, concerns about Aveline's stability. The sender, Judith Hart. The recipient, a board member from the scholarship committee. The email wasn't long, but it was enough to set everything in motion. After I closed the email, I stayed still for a long time, just listening to the faint buzz of the fridge and the dull hum of my own disbelief. The name at the top, Judith Hart, my mother's name, stapled to words that shattered things long before I ever knew they existed. It should have ended there, but of course, it didn't. I opened a browser, typed Vera's name into the search bar like I was lighting a match, and hit enter. Her face filled the screen immediately, smiling, polished, surrounded by puppies, and perfectly lit natural backgrounds. Her Instagram bio read, "Animal advocate, voice for the voiceless." Voice for the voiceless? There were dozens of posts, rescued pets, motivational captions, sponsored content from pet food brands, donation links, speaking engagements, TEDx, podcasts. One image showed her holding a senior dog that looked so much like Toby. I nearly stopped breathing. "You used what you destroyed to build a brand," I whispered. Scrolling further, I found a talk she gave titled, Healing after the hurt. She stood on stage in a muted pantsuit, spotlight hitting her hair just right. The caption underneath quoted her, "My family went through something tragic, but I chose healing." I stared at those words. Chose healing? What healing? You chose distance. You chose silence. You chose me as the scapegoat. She never said my name, not once. But it was all there, between the lines, tucked into the pauses. My sister struggled. There were misunderstandings. I had to walk away from toxicity. The crowd clapped, cried even. They always paint the victim as crazy, I muttered. It's how they clean up the mess. The fury wasn't sudden. It had been building for years. But this time, it moved differently. It didn't boil. It calcified. I closed the video and opened an old folder labeled Letters. In the bottom corner was an email I hadn't read in nearly 7 years, from someone who used to matter. Lucas. I clicked it open. It wasn't you, I knew that. But my parents, they said I needed to be smart, that your family was complicated. I didn't know how to fight them. I didn't know how to stay. I remembered the night it fell apart, dinner at his parents' place, quiet tension at the table, followed by a soft but sharp question from his mother. We were told there was an incident with a pet. We're a dog family, you understand. I'd nodded. I understood more than she thought. Lucas and I didn't last a week after that. That email stayed unread until now. 7 years. 7 years since he said he didn't have the backbone to stand by someone like me. I started printing things, screenshots of Vera's quotes, photos of her fake rescues, her sponsorship deals. I highlighted the TEDx lines that made my skin crawl. Then I opened a new folder. I named it Vera's Mask. In that folder, I pasted every piece of the performance she'd built, the halo she wore, shining with my shame. She got to be the wounded healer, the compassionate hero, and me? I got blacklisted, scrubbed out of my own future. I lost everything so she could have this. I was the villain in your story so you could play the saint, I whispered to no one. You never once asked if I was breathing. That night, I sat down with a fresh document and wrote a message. Polite, cold, direct. Vera, let's meet. No cameras, no pretense. 1 hour. You choose the place. I didn't expect her to agree, but I needed her to know I wasn't going away quietly. I attached no emotion, no threat. I simply clicked send. Then I grabbed a post-it note and wrote in bold letters. Next, the confession. I placed it beside the others. Erasure, mask. If she says yes, this will end face to face. If she says no, I'll end it another way. The reply didn't come that night. Or the next morning. Which wasn't surprising. Vera never did like to be summoned. But while I waited, I opened an old Yahoo account I hadn't touched in a decade. I had set it up for school back then, when email still felt like a luxury, not a weapon. I typed in the credentials out of instinct more than strategy. There it was. In the drafts folder. A message never sent. It wasn't addressed to me, but it might as well have been. If you just say sorry and admit it publicly, it began. I'll delete the video. It's been 5 years. People move on from scandals. I read it twice before I could breathe. Then I read it again. She didn't just lie. She wanted me to make the lie permanent. I was supposed to validate her story. Fold myself into it like a good sibling who knew her place. Say the words she wanted so she could move on, and I could be left with a scarlet letter she stitched herself. My hands trembled. Not from fear, from clarity. She was never trying to ruin me. That would have implied I was ever on her radar enough to matter. No, Vera was trying to shape a narrative, and I was just the quiet space she needed to fill. Later that afternoon, while checking my phone during a work break, I saw a cousin's Instagram story pop up. One of those filtered birthday party moments. Balloons, a table full of food, kids running around. I almost skipped past it until I saw Grace, Vera's youngest cousin. She must have been, 6 or 7 when everything happened? In the video, Grace was mid-sentence. Didn't you say she didn't do it? That she never touched the dog? The sound cut off as someone shifted the camera, but I'd already pressed pause. I called Grace that evening under the excuse of catching up. She sounded surprised but happy, a little nervous. We talked about small things at first: school, books, how grown up she looked now. Then I pivoted gently. Grace, I asked, do you remember what happened back then? With Toby? There was a pause. I mean, not a lot. Just that everyone was really mad. But I thought you two made up. I didn't correct her. And do you remember anything about what really happened? She hesitated. I just remember, I think it was Vera who tripped on him, not you. That's what I always thought. He yelped, and then you came into the hallway. I let silence carry the weight for a moment. That's helpful, I said softly. She quickly changed the subject, talking about her volleyball team and some boy she liked. I let her. When we hung up, I went back to my desk and opened 3 new folders on my computer. Accusation, cover-up, witness. Inside each, I began dropping files: screenshots, emails, quotes, timestamps, the old pet cam footage, the voicemail from Cam, Grace's recollection, even the unsent email. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't building a weapon. I was building a map of how one lie, protected by silence, nourished by power, could eclipse everything. I whispered to myself as I worked, I'm not writing this for revenge. I'm writing this so no one else ever has to be erased quietly. The next morning, her reply finally came. I'll meet, it said, but only if you don't bring anything to prove your side. If you come as my sister, not my prosecutor. I stared at the message, then at the file folders on my wall. Erasure, mask, truth. She didn't get to set the rules anymore. Not here, not now. You don't get to choose which version of me shows up anymore, I whispered, and started packing the drive. I picked the place. Neutral ground, 1 hour, no cameras, no masks. I got there early. The cafe was mostly empty, save for a barista wiping down a countertop and 2 older men nursing coffees near the window. I picked the far corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door. I didn't bring my laptop, just a folder. It sat beside my cup of black coffee like a sealed confession. Vera arrived 15 minutes late. No apology, no expression. Her face was a perfect blend of poise and pretense, foundation hiding fatigue, lips painted into something that resembled a smirk, but never quite got there. She sat down like she owned the space. No masks, remember? I said. Her eyes flickered. She didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, then opened the folder slowly. Inside were 3 sheets. The printed Reddit confession, the unsent email she saved in the family drive, and the transcript of her TEDx talk where she conveniently referred to me as the sibling who chose bitterness. I didn't slide them across, not yet. I want to talk about the night you tripped on Toby, I said, calm, direct. She blinked. We were kids. That dog was old. You overreacted. You mean, you overreacted? I corrected. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out the USB, and set it gently on the table. Want to watch the moment you let me take the fall for it? Vera's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her fingers twitched against her designer purse. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. That little dog cried out when you fell over him, I continued. You panicked. You saw Mom running down the hall, and instead of saying I'm sorry, you said my name. I leaned in. And I paid for it every day for the next 12 years. Her posture stiffened. You think people care about this now? They've moved on. I haven't, and neither have you. Otherwise, why are we here? Vera looked away. The door opened behind her, and Judith stepped in, followed closely by Dad. I didn't flinch. Vera had brought backup. Of course she had. Judith approached with less grace than usual. Her hair was grayer than I remembered, but her presence still carried that same air. Like every room was hers until proven otherwise. I didn't know you'd be here, I said flatly. She sat without asking. I wanted to hear the truth, for once. You've had 12 years, I said, and plenty of truth you ignored. Dad said nothing, just folded his hands on the table like we were at a PTA meeting. I slid the folder toward the center of the table. In case you want to refresh your memory. Judith opened the top sheet, the confession from Reddit, and her eyes scanned it slowly. Then the unsent email. Then the transcript. This is a lot, she whispered. It's just a fraction, I replied. There's more. Shelter blacklist. Emails to my scholarship board. Your fingerprints are all over it. Her hands trembled as she held the papers. I believed her because I needed someone to blame. And you didn't fight. I nodded once. And that was convenient for everyone, wasn't it? Judith didn't look at me. Dad still hadn't spoken. You didn't just bury me, I said. You locked the door behind me and handed out the shovels. Vera's voice came, quiet and low. I didn't think you'd survive. I stood, picked up the USB, slid it back into my purse. That's the part that saved me, I said. And I left. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just walked out into the sun, finally carrying my own name again. That night, the silence in my apartment was deeper than usual. Not the kind of silence that soothes, the kind that settles on your shoulders like a lead blanket and dares you to move. I sat at the kitchen table, the confrontation replaying like a broken reel in my mind. Vera's flinch, Judith's cracked voice, my father's void of words. Their faces had once meant home. Now, they just looked like locked doors. I reached for the envelope I'd prepared earlier, thick with therapy invoices, school rejection letters, screenshots of emails, and shelter blacklists, all labeled dated, irrefutable. At the top, I slipped in a typed note. This is not revenge. This is the bill you left unpaid. On the front of the envelope, I wrote in block letters. 12 years of silence. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I just walked up the porch steps and pushed the envelope through the mail slot. No one came to the door. I didn't wait to see if anyone would. By the time I got home, the tension in my chest had turned to something else. Not peace, exactly, but steadiness. 3 days passed before I got anything back. A letter came by mail, hand-addressed. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Judith. I didn't tear it open right away. I left it on my coffee table, unopened, for hours. Maybe part of me hoped it would vanish on its own, like everything else they'd refused to face. Eventually, I opened it. She didn't start with, I'm sorry. She didn't start with Dear Aveline. She started with honesty. I didn't protect you because I was afraid of being wrong about Vera. And because admitting we were wrong about you meant we failed as parents. Harriet told me something that night. She said she saw the dog jump when Vera stumbled. I told her to keep quiet. I chose silence. I needed the story to be clean. I read the whole letter once. Then again, slower. No excuses. Just truths long buried. Judith ended it with a line that stopped me cold. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope you know I've changed. I sat for a long time after that, the letter resting across my lap like something fragile. Change isn't a request, it's a receipt. I would believe she'd changed when the evidence showed up, just like they demanded from me. I folded the letter neatly and filed it into a new folder I'd labeled Unanswered Truths. Later that afternoon, I walked past a small cafe on 13th Street, one Vera used to frequent for her influencer content. Outside the window, tacked to the bulletin board, was a flyer for an upcoming mental health panel hosted by a local community center. My name was listed as a guest speaker. I stared at it, stunned. I hadn't applied, hadn't signed up. At the bottom of the flyer, printed in tiny letters, submitted by Cam Jordan, friend, advocate. A quiet smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. Maybe the story I was afraid to live is finally mine to tell. And if I was going to tell it, I'd start where I always wanted someone to listen. The recording wasn't loud. Vera's voice was soft, almost careful. But in those few words, she unraveled everything. I didn't think you'd survive. The way she said it wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was casual. Like it wasn't a confession, just an afterthought. Something she could toss into the air like a sigh and assume it would dissolve. I trimmed the audio clip and saved it under a file name no one would forget. Then, I opened a new message window and typed in the email of a journalist I used to follow when I still believed stories could be told honestly. No name, no context, just the recording and a subject line, for when image and integrity don't match. I hit send. 3 days later, it broke. It started local. Channel 5 Portland. By noon, it had spread. Animal rights influencer accused of fabricating abuse story for online fame. The headline sat under a split-screen image. Vera holding a rescue dog and a waveform from the recording I sent. They played the clip, her voice saying it again. I didn't think you'd survive. The anchor didn't editorialize. He didn't have to. An hour later, the animal charity she'd worked with for years released a statement. Due to a recent breach of ethical standards, we are terminating all partnerships with Ms. Vera Hart, effective immediately. They included words like misrepresentation, moral inconsistency, and conflict of interest. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just stared at the screen and felt my breath come a little easier. By evening, my inbox had flooded. Anonymous messages, some from names I hadn't seen since high school. I'm sorry I believed her. You deserved better. I never forgot. I didn't reply, I just read. And somewhere in that wave of messages, there was one from Judith, a voicemail. I didn't know she could fall this far. Her voice cracked. But maybe she needed to. I didn't call her back. Later that night, Cam sent me a voice memo. She didn't say much. I'm proud of you. You didn't just survive. You told the story on your terms. I saved it under a new folder and renamed the file. Worthit.mp3. Then I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched in months. I wrote, the apology I wanted never came, but the truth didn't need an invitation. That line sat on the page like a period at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. I closed the book and went to wash the dishes. That's when I found it. A card tucked in between the pile of unopened mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Judith. I opened it with steady fingers. If you ever want a seat at the table again, one is waiting. That was it. No more, no less. I stared at the words for a while. Then I folded the card, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it in the kitchen drawer beside old takeout menus and spare batteries. I had a seat. You threw it out. I built my own. But just because I built my own seat doesn't mean I'll never walk back in the room. Portland in December has a particular kind of hush to it. It's not the cold that quiets things. It's the way the light filters through gray clouds, how people talk softer, drive slower. I walked through a neighborhood I used to avoid, hands deep in my coat pockets, passing homes lit with wreaths and white lights. Windows glowed with dinners, dogs curled near fireplaces. I could almost pretend it was someone else's childhood I was remembering. Cam's voice played in my ear again, her message from the week before. I'd listened to it so many times, I didn't need the audio anymore. You didn't just survive, you told the story on your terms. And I had. Every word, every file, every name. They weren't weapons. They were light. And when you shine enough light, even the best masks melt. I wasn't the one who needed the story cleaned, I murmured. I was the one who had to survive it. Back at my apartment, I booted up the website I'd quietly built over the last month. Voices Rewritten. A digital platform for people like me, people who didn't get to defend themselves, who were labeled, silenced, buried in half-truths by the ones who were supposed to protect them. My story sat on the homepage, under a pseudonym, but Cam had left a comment that echoed in my inbox all week. Your real name deserves to be part of this. She was right. I clicked edit and typed it. Aveline Hart. Above it, I'd written a line that had become my compass. Being erased quietly is not peace. Speaking up is not violence. As I updated the site, an envelope slid through my mail slot. Judith's handwriting. Her second letter was shorter. This family won't survive what Vera did. Maybe it shouldn't. There was no request for a phone call. No appeal for grace. I sat with it for a while, then folded it, pressed it into the same folder as her first letter. Unanswered truths. Some wounds aren't stitched. They're left open to teach. That afternoon, on my way to pick up groceries, I crossed Burnside and saw someone familiar on the opposite sidewalk. Vera. Alone. Head down, oversized sunglasses, doing a poor job of hiding the weight she now carried. She didn't see me, or maybe she did. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just kept walking. Let her wonder if I still hate her. That's not my burden anymore. Indifference is the opposite of captivity. By nightfall, my inbox had tripled. People had found the site. They were sharing their own stories, false accusations, family betrayals, jobs lost to whispers they never got to confront. One message stopped me. You told my story without knowing me. Thank you. I stared at it a long time, then clicked reply. My fingers hovered for a second before I typed, "This is Aveline. I'm listening. The world may forget what they did, but now I'm someone they won't forget. But even strength needs stillness, and sometimes healing has fur and four legs." The sky over Portland was the kind of overcast gray that never quite commits to rain, but carries the weight of it anyway. I stood at the front door of the house I once called home, small box in hand, my breath misting in the cold air of Christmas Eve. 12 years. That's how long it took me to stand here again, not as someone seeking forgiveness, but as someone delivering the final line to a story they tried to write without me. I knocked once. No one opened the door right away, and I didn't wait. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The living room was quiet, too quiet for a holiday gathering. Judith sat on the couch, her hands resting in her lap. Vera stood off to the side, face washed out, lips pressed into a tight line. There were no garlands, no candles, just a silence that smelled like surrender. I walked to the coffee table and placed the box down. Inside, a transcript of the Reddit confession, a printed copy of the unsent email, and the audio file, burned onto a labeled disc. It wasn't just documentation. It was the weight of what they'd chosen not to see. I brought closure, I said, flat and measured. No bows, no forgiveness. Vera didn't look at me. Judith whispered, "Is this how you want it to end?" "You ended it 12 years ago," I replied. "This is me putting the period where you left a blank page." No one moved. No one argued. "This same folder," I added, "was sent this morning to the new board at the charity, to your top sponsor, and to a local journalist who actually believes in follow-ups." Vera's breath caught, but she didn't speak. Judith's gaze dropped to the carpet. "This isn't fair," she said quietly. "No," I agreed, "but at least now it's finally accurate." I turned and left the same way I came in. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth remembering. By the time I got home, night had fully settled. My apartment smelled like pine and laundry detergent. Warm. Mine. A small box sat at my doorstep. No return address. Inside, wrapped in a simple blanket, was a cat. Gray and white, eyes wide and curious. No note, just a paw print pressed into a card that said, "Thank you." I named him Milo II. That night, I sat at my desk with Milo curled in my lap, soft purring echoing through the stillness. I opened my laptop and added the final paragraph to my public story. At the top of the campaign page, voices rewritten, and at the bottom, a new quote in bold. They said silence was noble. I say justice is louder. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. A new email pinged in. Subject, book proposal, let's talk. The sender? A New York editor. I smiled, not because it was validation, but because, for once, the world wasn't looking away. And just like that, the girl they erased became the woman they couldn't ignore.